Hi, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Alan Pangborn, CEO of Chesapeake Gold. Hello, Alan.
Hey Peter, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Nice to talk to you. A friend sent me your way and said, "Talk to Alan, talk to Alan, talk to Alan." He's been telling me this for months, and I just had the pleasure to join an investor group call that he does. It was 8 a.m. Eastern, so 5 a.m. Pacific over here. Real pleasure to chat with a few investors for 10, 15 minutes just about all the stuff going on out there. Exciting times. And I'm not familiar with the Chesapeake story at all, but keen to jump into it with you. And maybe to start with, I could show you a list of questions from Rick Rule that we can try going through. They're meant to be simple and easy, but they're really wild cards in my opinion. So I'll share my screen,
Sure.
and it looks like these are the questions here. So
It's very
if we can, I'll
difficult
read out the
for
first one
an
to you.
exhibitor, in particular, but also for most presenters, to turn down an interested appeal for a one on one discussion with somebody who has done that presenter the favor of having listened to what they had to say and assimilated it. And the probability that you can obtain a second one on or a follow on one discussion, which could be much more beneficial to you than simply listening among 800 other people to a presenter. The possibility of that is high, so ask for it. The other thing that you do after the conference is pay particular attention to the arguments presented by presenters that make sense to you, and follow up with original research to determine whether or not you believe those claims are true. Often, if something sounds too
Sure.
What are the company's goals and what strategies will it use to reach them?
So the company goal is to effectively become a producer in the next sort of 5 years or so. If you go back a bit, the company has existed. Chesapeake Gold and the Metates project have existed for a long time. It used to be a Cambior project back before they went broke. But the more recent history, myself and some other investors had a private company, and we'd gone looking for a technology that allows you to heap leach sulfides in the gold systems, not just the copper systems. Because part of my history, I used to be in BHP Copper for a long, long time, and the copper world has slowly worked out how to heap leach oxides, then heap leach secondary sulfides, and now there's a couple of companies running around claiming they can heap leach primary sulfides. I was involved in some of that development and built one of the largest copper sulfide heap leaches in the world. And so after I left BHP and after I left SSR, I was looking around for why can't we do this in the gold in space? And so we found a technology that allows us, that should allow us to do that. We then went looking for an asset and a vehicle that we could use, put that technology in it, and then move forward. So that then gave me a market advantage because heap leaching is dramatically cheaper, capital wise, operating cost wise, power wise, water wise, you name it. It's got a lot of advantages. If you can treat the refractory ore body, you get away from autoclaves, which are damn expensive. And you could build a company around that by aggregating other assets that the technology should work on as well. And you've got a significant market advantage over everybody else because nobody else knows how to do it.
Yeah. So is that new things in old places or old things in new places? Sounds like,
It's the analogy I use is you throw all the pieces out of the box and then you put them back together again and you come up with a different way to achieve the same end result. So, we want to make gold bars and sell gold bars for
yep,
revenue and all the rest of it.
yep.
And there's ways that people do it today, and you sit there and ask yourself why half a dozen times or why not, and look around the rest of the industry and go, well, they're doing that piece of what I want to do over here, and they're doing that piece of what I want to do over there. And you put the pieces together to the jigsaw, and you get a different picture, right?
And so conventional consulting studies and the typical stages, do we expect to see, resource estimates, feasibility studies, all that, jump through all the hoops?
Yep. No,
Cool.
we've done a PEA. We put a resource update out
Yeah, exactly.
3 or 4 weeks ago. We're working vigorously on the metallurgical test work so that all of that comes together to support going to a PFS.
Yep.
And we hope to be able to start that towards the end of this year, early next year. And then keep moving forward, and that will then lead to more and more confidence in what we're doing. I hope that's the plan.
Proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? And
Yep.
that's when you sit down to the table, actually build these things.
Yep.
Exciting. Good for you. Thank you. Lots in there. Amazing. This may be the next question. How are
I
you?
had changed from my corporate regalia to blue jeans and a polo shirt, and I was wandering around the floor, and there was a particularly aggressive promoter. You know, the type of sort of a white shoe guy, wonderful salesman. At any rate, I attempted to get past his booth unmolested, but was unsuccessful and dragged into the booth. And he was just vociferous in his company's exploration potential and an extraordinarily aggressive program to drill it off. And I, at one point in time, remarked, well, this is an extremely aggressive program. I understand what you're saying about news flow. How about money? How will you accomplish this? And I'll never forget Tekoa. He looked at me and said, well, money's unimportant. And I couldn't help but take the bait. I said, really, my money's important. Explain to me why money wasn't important. And he said,
This may be the next question. How are you going to make me money on this deal? And when will I make it?
It's really getting in on the ground floor of a technology that will change the industry and how they look at sulfide refractories. And as the confidence and the understanding in the industry grows, the value of the company will continue to increase. As a base case, in the case of Metatis, or not as a base case, is in a downside case, you've still got a massive ounce in the ground story. So your worst case scenario is we continue to trade as a levered play against the gold price, if that's what you like in investing.
Yep.
And some of our big key investors, that's what they invest in.
Well, and there seems to be this mergers and acquisition wave rolling down the beach
As
shore,
well.
getting closer to us, closer to us. It's coming our way. It's going to be here one of these days, right? We're
Right.
seeing the mega mergers. We're seeing the mid-tier stuff happening down lower in the food chain. And, you look around at how desperate it is with the real small juniors. I don't see guys making discoveries. Sure, there's some, but to have resource already established and stuff like that, there's a lot of hurdles to get there,
And show me how the likes of Newmont and Barrick are going to replace 4 million ounces a year.
Yeah, it's cheaper to buy it than it
Are
is
they
to
going to
find it.
buy? Are they going to buy 4 1 million ounce deposits every year and mine them in a year?
Well, and which
Hey,
are
you-
they? Where are those
Yeah.
ones too,
So
by the
they've
way?
got to look bigger. We are one of the largest undeveloped gold and silver resources known in the world today. Yeah, 20 million ounces of gold, or 19 million ounces of gold, 480 million ounces of silver. As I said, I view that as our worst case scenario as we trade as a gold in the ground story. The upside is we're right. The technology works. We've put out our proof of concept. And we just got to do the work now to fully understand it and go through all of the appropriate steps and toll gates. We will do a feasibility study. I do not believe in building off of pre-fees. That's a guaranteed way to get yourself stuffed. Yeah. So, yeah, that's how you make money if you come into this deal. You've got 2 ways.
what a question, right? Like, and I remember I always fiddle and spin my wheels trying to talk about, well, it depends when you buy it and when you sell it, and your decisions are your responsibility. Stop, Peter, stop. That's way too complicated. Serve them up on a platter is what they want,
Yeah.
right?
You've got a base case, and the upside is the technology changes the industry. And
Yeah,
I can't even tell you what that's worth. I have
no,
no idea.
totally. And nobody knows really. Like
No.
that's that you're looking around a corner there that what it's a it's hard to see.
Well,
The crystal ball is cloudy, right?
think
Like
of the future. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Pierre Lassonde. It
mhm,
was one of the keynote speakers at the which conference? At one of the conferences, one of the bigger ones. So it might have been Beaver Creek for lunchtime or something. And he made the statement, look at the amount of gold that's needs to keep coming.
yep,
And somebody asked him, but most of that gold today is refractory
yep.
and it ain't cheap with the current processes. Yeah.
Nothing's cheap anymore, too, right? Like
Right. But even
inflationary.
relatively,
Yep,
there's no margin. These 1 gram ore
yep,
bodies don't work as an autoclave.
yep, yep. It blows my mind that there's guys in the U.S. mining what $15 rock,
Oh, I used to
and that's
oversee
profitable.
one. I used to oversee one.
Whoa,
I was the COO at SSR,
right?
and Marigold is one of the lowest grade gold mines that's operating, and we were making money. We were making money at $1,300 gold, let alone 1,900 or 2,000 now.
Yeah, there's
Um,
nothing like scale, eh? Really?
we used to move 83 million tons a year at 0.35 to 0.4 grams per ton. We were getting 70+% recovery,
So,
and we made money. We were making 200,000 ounces a year.
yeah,
At the
and
time, sub $1,000 um, cash cost. So
That's
a big operation too.
it
And
was.
yeah,
help but take the bait. I said, really, my money's important. Explain to me why money wasn't important. And he said, he said, there's a real hot West Coast broker named Rick Rule, and he really likes my project. He obviously didn't recognize me. And he's going to give me all the money I need. But see, here's the opportunity. The stock's selling at 50 cents now, and he won't finance under $2. So when I get the stock to $2 from 50 cents, Rick will finance, and you will be able to leverage off Rick's money at $2. And I, at that point in time, pulled out my wallet, pulled out my driver's license, showed it to him, and said, you know, I know this Rick Rule guy pretty well. And I think the probability of you solving your financing problems with him is extraordinarily low. So when I say listen to these stories but verify, that's what it has to do. But getting back to the main thing, this is a capital-intensive business, and if the company has no capital, they have no business. And so if the person telling the story has
well, I'll jump to the next one. What can go wrong? How will I know what is going wrong? And what will you do if it goes wrong? What a question.
So what could go wrong? I mean, the obvious answer to that is the technology doesn't work.
Yeah.
And how will you know? Well, when we put the press releases out.
You'll see the
But
stock
but
price.
but what are we doing
Yeah.
to make sure it doesn't go wrong? Okay. So as I mentioned, I worked for BHP for a long time. I have been through multiple mega project reviews, both on the receiving end and on the reviewing end. Within a company like that has a very structured process and system.
I'm sure that makes the public company audit experience feel fairly innocuous.
Benign, yeah. And so I fully understand the expectations of the lenders, of the investors, of the technical people that will review it before they'll give me the money to build it,
Yeah.
and what they're going to need. So all of our work is being done in a third-party independent lab. We're running duplicates, we're running replicates, we're running all the QA, QC stuff around the test work.
Yeah.
We are sampling and assaying everything that moves.
Yeah.
Because what happens with these processes, what can go wrong is there is something in the ore or in the solution that's building up as you circulate it over time that you're not aware of. Right? That could be copper is a common issue in the gold industry because it consumes cyanide. In the copper industry, manganese is a problem in electrowinning. And these things can build up. So part of what we're doing is we are doing a very extensive and extremely complete investigation of not just gold and silver. What else is in there that may cause me problems further down the track?
Well, and it's so complicated, right? Different domains in the ore body,
Yes,
mineralogy, grind size, temperature, chemistry, input
right.
chemicals.
So great comment. So I'll address that particular comment. We have a 3 or 4 stage process we're working through to get to the end point. Okay, so stage 1. Does it work? Proof of concept.
Bench scale, lab
scale
something.
in the lab, in a column. Does it work?
Yep.
Today, the answer is yes. We were able to improve the gold recovery pre-oxidation to post-oxidation from 30% to 60% and silver recovery from 15-20% to 50%. It works. Okay. What variables do what to it? Stage 2. That's what we're working on at the moment. So that's all the things you just mentioned. Temperature, crush size, reagent strengths, time, all of that stuff. Stage 3, how much under a set of standard conditions that you're going to use for your design does the ore body vary from location to location, from domain to depth to mineral type, all of those things, and build a proper geometallurgical model? Most of the gold industry never, ever does that.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So again, and that comes from some interesting times in BHP, right? So you build a geometallurgical model. You then make a decision when you've got all of that done. Do I build from there, or do I need to build a pilot plant?
Yeah.
Right? Look, I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of pilot plants because I think they actually give you a false sense of security because you tend to test one sample from one place once. Whereas
and it worked once, so we're good.
It worked once, yeah. and so, but if you've built a geomet model as well, then I think the two complement each other. But one without the other, it's a bit risky. Well, because of that one sample, one place once. With the geomet model actually gives you more value, I believe, than the pilot plant, because it tells me by time, by phase, by location, what I should expect.
And Alan, if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it.
Yep.
So if you don't have that in your block model, you're flying blind as far as those.
You've got a blanket recovery that you don't know if you're actually going to achieve.
Right, from a blended composite across the deposit, like guys,
that doesn't actually exist.
It never will. Stop.
Yeah. Stop. So anyway, so that's how you know what can go wrong. What are we gonna do so as it doesn't?
Yep. Well, and then you got all the little company problems too that can go wrong, right? Like those are kind of big company problem things, like operational, production, real performance stuff. But then there's all the little things.
Yeah, there's really only one thing that can seriously go wrong.
Yeah. That
kills a company, and that is that the project you built didn't work. Right? And look. The industry as a whole is littered with them. Yeah. Part of the reason BHP put such a rigorous system in place was because they had a half a dozen of them in a row. Right? And if you go back in time to the 1990s, early 90s, I can rattle them off. Escondida sulfide leach, concentrate leach, didn't work. HBI, didn't work. Hartley Platinum didn't work. Bean Up Beach Sands didn't work. Magma Acquisition was a freaking disaster. After that, they put a system in place, and I'll tell you what, we didn't have one
Wow.
project after that.
Wow.
So that was 1995 until 2006 when Ravensthorpe didn't do what it was supposed to do. That was the first one. So for a decade, we were able to build projects safely, on time, on budget. And as I said, most importantly, they worked.
Yeah.
They delivered what they were supposed to deliver.
There was some bullish years in that too, 2000, early 2000s. That was not, the lights were on for the gold market at least, right?
Yeah. So anyway.
Impressive. Yeah, that's very impressive. Yeah, fascinating stuff. I'm so interested too, like how much of that you try and bring over to the junior and how much is just internalized within you, what that checklist for those, the big company even look like. There's a fascinating rabbit's hole, rabbit's nest of stuff in there. Great.
Yeah.
We could go on to the next one for the sake of
sure.
Rick's questions.
Current liquidation value.
I can assimilate your story into a framework that I can deal with. The first question would go something like this. Tell me what your company's liquidation value is. I know how many shares outstanding you have and what they sell for. That's the price. What I'm worried about is the value. And I don't want you to talk about your assets in terms of the market cap that they might compete if owned by a competitor. What I'm interested in is what's the liquidation value of your company, the blowdown value. If you took the projects out and sold them for cash to a competitor, what's it worth? I'm not suggesting, by the way, to COA, that if you can't buy companies for dimes on the dollar in terms of liquidation value, that you don't do it. I'm just suggesting that if you know the liquidation value, you know the downside, which is important as knowing the upside. The second thing that you ask them is, please distill for me the most important unanswered so that I can assimilate your story into a framework that I can deal with.
Current liquidation value is the value that we're prepared to sell it for. And one of the interesting things about Chesapeake is that between three large shareholders, we can stop anything.
Yeah.
Which in one way I quite like, because it means that I believe the technology has significant value.
Yeah.
The current asset is trading at $4 an ounce, which is way too cheap. Yeah. Our market cap, thanks to the gold price today, is, I think we finally got through 200 million Canadian, 150 or 160 US, which is great. There you go, 185. Yeah, that's about right. So is it worth more than that? Is it worth more than $4 an ounce? Don't know.
Yep.
The market says it is because the share price is tracking the gold price better than anything else at the moment. I think part of that is because people don't know the story.
Yep.
Do I think the technology is worth more than that? It depends on who is looking at you.
Yep. Because
the technology is valuable to the acquirer, potentially more than the seller.
For sure, if it works, right? And they can apply it across their portfolio of operating mines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you get in, so that's when I say the value of the technology is indeterminate, because it very much depends on the eye of the beholder, right?
And there's no comps, and there's no comparable market stats to be like, oh, it's this many dollars. And
yeah, there's a couple of comps. Proton isn't listed.
But then how do you strip out your resource endowment valuation and isolate the implied value of the technology and have a comp to that of other tech plays? That's right. That's very muddled.
Well, I know what I rolled it into the company for.
Yeah, there's that. Yep, and that may be the most salient stat, really.
So if you sit there and say $4 an ounce for the gold gives you what we've got today, I rolled the technology in at the time for shares in Chesapeake, and it was 45 million Canadian.
Yeah.
All right. So do you take the 45 million off of the 185, or do you add it onto it because nobody's valuing it? Or I don't know. Yeah.
Yep.
You know, at the end of the day, it takes two to tango, and it's who's prepared to pay what. I'll give you an example. Previous to this role, I was the CEO of Guyana Goldfields for a grand total of 8 months. I inherited a mess. We put it on the market. The first offer, which we accepted and signed a binding bid, was 60 cents a share. We finally sold it for $1.85. So what's it worth?
Well,
is it worth $1.85?
Yeah.
Of course it is. Somebody paid it. Would we have accepted 60 cents? Yes, because the alternative was ugly. So what's it worth?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
People can get all bulled up in a hurry, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they see that other person go first and they're like, no, I need that.
Right. I mean, we
Amazing.
had 60 cents, 90 cents, $1.10, $1.30, $1.85 over literally February through to August when we closed.
What a busy year, eh? Isn't that fun? Fun 6 months.
So, you know, when somebody asks you, well, what's the liquidation value? It depends what somebody's prepared to pay for it.
Yep. Well, and do you guys have property, plant, and equipment? Is there much tangible
There's
assets?
property, yes. I mean, you've got all the leases. So property, intangibles, or the technology, or whatever you want to call it, is another asset. We also own 60-something% of Tallapoosa in the US. So there are assets within the company.
And presumably some cash too?
Yeah, we've got 26 million Canadian in the bank. So I'm not looking for equity as far as issuing more equity to get more cash. We're in a strong position. We burn about $5 to $6 million a year, so I'm good for a while. You know, would I raise money at this price? That I doubt it. I don't need to.
Maybe if there was some strategic shareholder or some, person who needs to seat at the table. But then you also got to be cognizant about this control block that you have in place right now and the potential to chip away at that. And control is worth a lot, especially if you've been through these situations where, you've had these competitive bids coming in on something that becomes sought after. If you don't have a steady hand on the wheel during that process, watch out, because they'll take the first offer and then close it before the second one even appears. Whoops. Like, there's a lot of ways to make mistakes in this business. And this is a tightrope walk that not many people get to do very often at all, ever.
No.
Right. And so, yeah, relevant experience for you there. For wild stories. Amazing. Thanks. Yeah.
So carry on.
Well, can I ask you
the
the
most dramatic example I can give you of personal benefit occurred in maybe 1998 or 1999 at an obscure conference in Western Australia called Diggers and Dealers. Diggers and Dealers is very colorful. It's held in a mining town in Western Australia called Kalgoorlie. And the theme of the title, as the name suggests, is that the financial interests in Australia meet with the mining people, hence diggers and dealers. And Kalgoorlie, to put this in context, is sort of 1,000 kilometers from anywhere. It's a town that in those days produced 1 million ounces of gold a year from within city limits. In fact, the super pit, the Kalgoorlie super pit, approached the town from the northwest. And when I say super pit, the pit was a mile across, a truly spectacular pit. At any rate, the most dramatic...
Who else will you tell this story to? How will you tell them and when?
Look, we took over management 2 years ago. I've been telling anybody and everybody that will listen to me the story about the technology. and what we're trying to do and why it's different, because I had to overcome the historical baggage of this massive $4 billion project that was previously in the market and never got built and didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I've had to overcome that. And we're obviously also trying to improve our profile in front of investors. We're trying to improve our market cap as people become more attuned to what we're trying to do and understand how this is a unique opportunity in the gold and silver space.
Yeah.
It's not a royalty story that everybody's copying because several of them have got very large margins. It's not an exploration story because I already know where the elephant is. It's dead. It's lying there. We just got to work out how to fix it. Yeah. And how to extract the value out of it. It is a very unique story. Nobody else is marketing anything like this in the gold space.
Yep.
There are two others that are marketing a technology story in the copper space.
Yep.
But they don't have assets.
Yep. And they're not public from Jetty's not for sure.
Jetty's not? Okay. Yeah.
No.
No, in that case, neither of them are public.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when it comes down to this sort of metallurgical technology that will change a market,
yeah,
we're a unicorn, to use the tech company's language. Yeah.
I heard, what was it? I don't know, 6 months ago or something, I want to say. Heard some stories about methods to deal with arsenic from people in Peru who had things that they said were important breakthroughs. So refractory ores, I guess, again.
Yeah, arsenic. So I'm a metallurgist by profession.
Yeah.
And as you can probably tell, I enjoy tracking all sorts of technologies. Because when you put the puzzle back together again, somebody may have solved a problem somewhere else that you can steal and use over here.
Science, the progress of science, absolutely.
Yeah,
yep.
R&D does not stand for research and development. It stands for rob and duplicate. Right?
Yep, I think so.
So one of the failings in our industry is people do not look around at what everybody else is doing.
Yes.
And learn from where somebody's done something unique and go, oh, I can apply that over here because I've got the same problem.
Well, and is that a reason to build a pilot plant so you can have a demonstration facility, or you bring in smart people out to do what you do? Look now, or the paperwork's enough for them to see the reports and the numbers that come out of it?
Look, when we get to that point, we will.
Yep.
We will. When I get to the point that I'm comfortable with where it's all going and we understand more and more about all the various levers, we'll sit down, we'll organize an investor tour to the lab, for argument's sake, and say, look, there you go.
What about
there's all my little soldiers standing in a row. Yeah.
And do you want to bring in any of the big nasties early too? Like, do you bring in the BHP type companies to see what you're doing, or?
I wouldn't mind BHP because they won't try and take me out. Well, because I know they're not particularly into gold.
Yeah.
But there could be some knock-on effects on what we're doing for other assets in their portfolio. I hadn't thought about them much, but the bringing in a major is a double-edged sword. Yeah, and I can tell you that for a fact from my past when I was with SSR. One of the first things when we were looking at single asset companies was we would look at the share register and see if there was a big nasty already on the share register. Because if we went and bid for that company, all we were doing was supplying the alternative bidder a benchmark price and if he didn't pay up, it's because he didn't believe it was worth that much.
He knows more than you do.
And he knows more than I do. Yeah. And if he did pay up, I can't compete. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It brings credibility. The flip side is potentially it brings credibility in the eyes of the other investors. If one of the majors is prepared to come and take a 9.9% stake in us and open their technical development crew to us, that brings credibility. So
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword. Yeah.
But that's the answer, everyone and anyone. Do you guys have like IR staff? Do you have an IR person?
We are very close to announcing a new IR person, and that's
Cool.
all I can say today.
Yeah, it's such a challenge trying to get all that stuff straightened out and on the venture and things like that too.
Yeah.
It's
So
there's a lot of hoops
yeah.
and doing it properly, and a lot of guys who
Next
want to
one.
try and skirt the rules. So it's like, let's just do it the right way, because
Yeah.
with your guys' background, you have pretty high standards.
The second thing that you ask them is, please distill for me the most important unanswered question right now. What's the thing that you can do right now that will deliver me the quantum increase in value that is required to induce me to take the risk to invest in your shares? I understand that you're trying to prove a 5 million ounce gold deposit, but what's the first step? What's the most important unanswered question right now? It might be that the company has done surface sampling and established a grid, and what they need to do now is trench to see how deep that gold mineralization goes. It might be that they have in fact trenched it and they've developed a drill target, so the next thing that they need to do is shoot geophysics. The second
Yeah,
Look,
please tell me about your management team directors, especially their past success in mining and market.
Sure. I think the difference is when you truly believe you're going to build it, and if you've ever built anything before, you better get it right before you start rather than trying to fix it afterwards. Yeah. And so it brings a level of conservatism to it. It brings a level of caution.
Mm-hmm.
It brings a level of respect on why you're doing what you're doing. You don't do the earthworks on 10-meter contours, guys. Yeah, because if you're out by 5, it's a lot of muck. And so you there's a reason you go through each of the steps. There's a reason you do all of this work beforehand, and it's all because of the same thing. Your boss never likes surprises. The investors never like surprises. So do the work and don't give them surprises. Management. Look, our team is really small at the moment. Some of the management team comes from a company called Francisco Gold, and that includes the executive chair, my VP of exploration down in Mexico, and they were very, very successful finding some assets in Guatemala and Mexico, which they sold into Glamis, that became Goldcorp, that went into Newmont. They spun out and formed, or they got hold of Chesapeake after they sold Francisco Gold. And so they were looking to do the same thing and do it again. Unfortunately, this one didn't flip as easily. And it didn't flip for a couple of reasons. I think one, the grade for an autoclave plant is challenging. And secondly, the majors, or the people that think they're majors in the gold space, stubbed their toe on 2 or 3 projects and learned that buying these large deposits and then trying to build them wasn't as easy as people think it is. I had the experience. I've built projects anywhere from $4 million through to billions. And I can tell you, when you jump into that billion range, it is a totally different game. Totally different. The last one I did was the Spence project, which was this copper project in Chile. At the time, this was 2002 when it was approved. It had $1 billion budget. That was when $1 billion still bought you something. And so, to give you an idea of the dimensions, it was a 250,000 ton a day mine. That's 80 million tons a year. Yeah, it's actually a bit more. It was a 60,000 ton a day crushing plant, which people go, "Oh, that's not that big." It actually is. We peaked at 1,000 people on site during construction. To put that into perspective, you're in Victoria, I'm in Vancouver. In the middle of cruise season, that is the peak day of the number of people that show up in Vancouver or Victoria when there's 3 or 4 cruise ships in. Imagine managing that many of people every day, getting them to their work site, from their work site, feeding them 3 squares a day. Okay?
I think of the stupidity I see with the micro caps, and I can't even imagine. You really have to have standards at that point, because you have to have people who know what they're doing, and you have to have some enforcement of standards, as I say, because the little stuff creeps in on the edges, and this guy's doing it wrong, and then 5 guys down the line, they're completely backed up because this guy, whatever. I can't even. I don't know.
The little things, as you said, food supply and rubbish disposal.
Yeah.
Because what goes in comes out.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter which way it comes out, but it comes out somewhere. If you're 1,000 beds, if you're 10% short on your camp, when you've got 200 people, that's only 20 beds.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you've got 10,000 people, that's 1,000 beds you've got to come up with. To give you a crazy idea, we used to have 6 serving lines in the canteen.
Wow.
We used to program the buses with 10-minute arrival slots to 6 lines. So that was 6 buses to each one line, each individual line every 10
And they
minutes.
kept it? And they kept the schedule?
Yeah, because if they didn't, like the airport, you went to the back of the queue, pal. Yeah.
Good.
No, so
Good.
we had
Wow.
penalties on the catering contract if the guy was standing in the line for more than 10 minutes waiting to get his food.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
All sorts of little things that suddenly aren't so little. Yeah. So the ability, when you're going to build something, the team has to know how to do it.
Yep.
And in my background, I've done it before at every scale you can think of, including the large project that existed here before. I know how to build it. The reason we're not doing it is I never knew how we could fund it.
Yeah. But it helps to have that experience in the early stages, because you're making decisions now that you're pruning a decision tree in the future. The things that you're doing now affect what they can choose from down the line. Having somebody who's been through some of that war battle, the stress of all that, and knowing where you need flexibility and what kinds of things constitute stupid mistakes, you can see those far off in the distance and say,
well,
no,
and also,
not today.
It also means that at this stage, when things are relatively quiet, we're putting in place processes and systems that when you get to the day all hell breaks loose, you don't have to worry about those things. Bills come in, they get approved, they get paid, right? So you're not got a bunch of grumpy people ringing you up every day. Why haven't I been paid? It's 60 days, 90 days, 120 days late.
Yeah.
Right? It's all just noise you don't need. So sort it out now. Sort out your policies, sort out your processes, sort out all of that stuff that you know that the back office will just work.
Let alone permitting, let alone community engagement.
But even all of that, things. Peter, community, start early, understand what promises have been made, you're going to make, and keep them, because the community doesn't go away.
No, you're there. You're the guest.
Management comes, management goes. Boards come, boards go. Companies come, companies go.
Yeah.
The local community will still be there.
Yeah.
And if somebody made them a promise 20 years ago, I will guarantee you when the rubber hits the road, somebody's going to show up and say, but you said.
Yeah, they want it.
Right? So
can't blame them.
There's a lot of things.
Investors the same way, right? You think about how investors track performance and how obsessive they can be about, oh, you missed this mark, you hit that mark. The analyst community, in proper stocks, as opposed to us, gold
Yeah.
bugs.
It's interesting. Maybe the investors are better at it, but the analysts, they never look behind them. It's always forward looking.
Yeah, they don't keep a scorecard. Management scorecards. Yeah.
The only one I've seen, this one.
Hmm.
And I haven't read it all yet, but it's a Scotia report. High gold prices plus easing cost equals better year for operating performance. And it actually goes through by company. I mean, look at this.
Yep.
By company, their share performance, when they hit guidance, when they miss guidance,
Beautiful.
who was the CEO at the time.
Beautiful.
Right?
Beautiful.
Unfortunately, SSR isn't on there. It would have been nice if they were, because we hit guidance every quarter I was there.
Like a clock, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as I said, I was the COO. So background of the team, Doug Flegg, ex-BMO, he helps us with the marketing and the IR. He knows investors. You've got, as I mentioned, the VP of Exploration, the chairman are ex-Francisco Gold. They've been there and done some of that before. Eric, who unfortunately has just decided to go and take a different role. So Gary was with Cambior, so he knows the asset upside down and inside out. He knows where all the skeletons are, what's in what closet.
Yeah. Good.
Alberto was with Randy at Francisco.
Yeah.
Eric Underwood was my CFO until recently. He worked with me back in Chile when we built that project.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was doing a whole bunch of the financial and system stuff back then. And Bernie's our corpsec. So, with the board and management, we've got a pretty strong team. Obviously, as time moves forward and we get to different steps, we start building out. Currently, there are two other people who help me a lot that aren't on the website. One is a guy called Carl Edmonds. He was the chief geologist at SSR.
Yep.
He was the guy that said Marigold was fine. He was the guy that said CB was higher grade than they think it is.
Wow.
Man, he got it right at least 3 times that
Wow.
publicly are known.
Yeah.
In my books, if a geologist can get it right consistently, he's
Twice?
worth his. You hire the guy.
Even
So
once. I'm listening after he gets it once, even at this point. Really.
So he is the guy that redid our resource estimate for us.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so him and a guy called Mark Jutras, who's in town here too.
And all those geostats, like, people think they're so arcane and just you can't touch them. You can't, people hear statistics, they get scared. But the interpolations and all the parameters and things like that, there's a lot of discretion in the work that gets done. From my background in statistics, I believe that there's always a lot of discretion in terms of
lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 people use Colgate. You just got to find the right 10 people.
So and some people have that eye though, and they can see something different about a deposit and make guesses that other people don't, have the courage to make for whatever reason. Or so yeah.
And some of it, the 9 out of 10 type thing.
Yep.
You want a very large ounce, large deposit.
Yep.
All you've got to do is expand your search radiuses, and you can smear it and spread it everywhere. We reported a 16% increase in gold, and the silver didn't move. And how we got there was we drilled 5 holes to get met samples. That's what we drilled them for. When we got the answers back of those first 5 holes and compared them to the block model, they were 18 to 20% above the grade in the block model.
Yeah.
And you go, well, that ain't bloody right.
Yeah.
So we drilled another 18. There you go. There's the right paragraph. We drilled another 18 holes, and the same thing happened. And so at that point, I got Carl and said,
Stop.
Carl,
Yeah.
what's wrong? Something is wrong.
Something's wrong.
I shouldn't be able to put pins in the cushion and consistently pull it out and it's higher grade than the cushion says it is. So we redid it all. We went through all of the search radiuses and hard boundaries, soft boundaries, leaky boundaries,
Yeah.
all of that stuff that the geostatisticians love.
Yeah.
Is this population the same as that population? And all this stuff. And I get lost after a little while.
Yeah.
My stats is reasonable, but I still get lost. And we found that when we redid it, the grade went up by 15.8%. Call it 16. Yeah, let's not get overly excited. And that's really good because 16% in the same rock goes to the bottom. What the hell is that? Oh, that's the outliers.
Yeah, from the news release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just saw 500 grams a ton. I'm going, what?
No.
We're
It's,
missing a decimal
that's
place
the cap.
in there
No, these are
somewhere.
capping numbers.
Yeah, no, I didn't read it all.
Sorry.
Take it down. It's
Confusing
distracting me.
you. Yeah, I know. Sorry.
So at the end of the day, we end up with the increase in grade, which now agrees closer to the drill holes that we put into it.
Yeah.
So it probably suffered from a bit of smearing where the high grade was diluted and the low grade was lifted up. So anyway, didn't change much else. That goes to the bottom line. Move on. That will be the next block model that we use for the economics.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to questions.
And was this more? I wonder. Was it like how much of that was? Was it a capping story? Was it? It wasn't the capping. It was. Was it the domains, or was it just?
There was a search radiuses.
Yeah.
Leaky domains.
Like you say. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some.
If you go back and compare A to B, we lost total some ounces, but they were all on the edges. The grade of what was left in inferred came up to the average grade of the rest of the SEDs that were around it.
Yeah.
Which means that you're not pulling in waste and it's just pulling it above cutoff and then you're calling it all. Yeah. So, if somebody looks at it that knows what they're looking at it, they'll just go, yep, I know what that means.
And do you ever think about like making the data room publicly available?
Publicly, depends what you mean by public. Will I sign a CA and share the information with somebody? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, and people have the reports and things like that, so the full report is there. But there is an audience for the data. I find more and more there's people out there who want, if they can have the stuff to put in Leapfrog themselves, right? That they can have a look at the full geological model. It increases their confidence, and putting that in the information kind of disseminates, and they kind of compare notes, and people, hey, look at this screenshot.
That would be a extremely competent investor.
There's not many of them out there, but I think but I think they do exist. It happened with Lundin Mining, with that project that they have there with the big drill holes, and they were putting out fairly detailed information about some information's on their website, and then
you mean the copper thing in Argentina?
Yeah.
They went straight down a breccia pipe.
And they published, database with lithology and grade and trace and coordinate, the whole thing, to make it really easy for people to look at it and be like, oh, I see this. And who knows if there wasn't much talk about the breccia pipes, really, from what I heard about that too, right? It's always on to the next one, the next hole that's how many kilometers away.
Yeah, but if you know any
tons.
of the geology up and down that mountain range,
I don't know.
Those sorts of grades to those sorts of depths are one thing.
Yeah,
they've gone down a breccia pipe.
Yeah. And I love drilling down the throat of, talking about drilling down the throat of things anyways, for continuity's sake, but that's high grade underground stories. This is not big pit stuff,
no, it could be. I mean, I'll give you the example in Chile. is Los Bronces and
Yep.
Andina. They are actually the same deposit, mined by two different companies. It is a massive breccia pipe. It's
Yep.
2% copper.
Yep.
It is thousands of meters deep.
Yep.
Andina is further down the deposit than Los Bronces is above.
Yep.
It was an open pit at the top, which is
Yep.
what Los Bronces was mining. Andina is underground. They exist. Don't get me wrong. They exist.
Yes.
Yeah. But they and when you find a good one, they are impressive.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
The pictures of the cemented sulfides on the edge of the flow pipe or whatever like that, right?
Right.
And oh man, cemented with chalcopyrite, like really?
Yeah.
Like quartz with gold in it that's cemented in chalco. Like what are we talking about?
Yeah. So
That looks
anyway,
amazing.
it's phenomenal. It's
Yeah.
just it's in Argentina. So depends
So-
on your view on Argentina.
Oh, so much fun stuff. Yeah.
Who owns the
To
company?
achieve this end. If I can't verify it, obviously I can't speculate on this occurring. I wouldn't have enough information. You're with me so far?
Yeah.
Another thing that's very important that you can do at conferences is you can say to the person, whoever it is, you know, if I invest in your company, I'm going to read the quarterlies, I'm going to read the press releases, I'm going to read the filing statements, and I am going to be looking for how to understand your incremental process up to getting a yes or no answer on that unanswered question. Who specifically in the company can I talk to give me human color on these filing statements? Where will I get my information? I'm not asking you for material non-public information. I'm asking for your help in deciphering the corporate speak that I will see in memes.
Oh, so much fun stuff. Yeah.
Who owns the company? How much did they or will they pay for it?
And when can
And
they sell it?
when can they sell it?
You know, it's
So-
a Rick Rule question. He's asking about warrants and financings.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the street-
So there are a couple of million options out. There are no warrants out. There's 67,300,000 and change shares issued.
That's right.
Who paid what? Eric Sprott is our largest shareholder. He came in the financing in August of 2020 at $5 a share.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah.
8.7 million shares. So he's our biggest shareholder by a reasonable amount. I'm actually the second largest shareholder. I own 7.45 million shares. So about 11-12%. Peter Palmetto's the next largest one. Peter, you got to be careful. You got to put A plus B plus C plus D together to get the right count.
Yep.
Yeah. And we're the top three shareholders. Yeah. So that, now just scroll. Yeah, scroll.
It's at the bottom. It'll take a
Stop
sec.
bouncing around.
No, it'll take a sec.
It won't show it all.
Yeah. You've got it in a few different entities: personal name, registered accounts, corporate names.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maria and Angelica.
That's my wife.
Bam. Okay. Great.
Yeah. So I own 7.45 something.
Yep.
And it doesn't show up.
No, and so is that a fairly old stock holding for you that you've had for?
No,
year? Was
no, it was part of the deal when we brought the technology and took over management.
so? Was that what year?
2021. It won't
s-
show up.
There's no filing for that.
Yeah, it was press released and everything.
Sure.
I don't know why it's not on SETI, but
Well, or whether or not this app scraped SETI and caught it. You know, sometimes they make mistakes too at what they
Yeah.
catch.
no, it's public.
Yeah.
7.4 million shares through a company, a private investment company.
Yep.
and 56,000 between me and the missus.
Yep. And so
Yeah.
this was the last, was the Sprott round kind of like the last round of fundraising?
Yeah, $5-6 it was.
Yeah.
It was somewhere around there. It was about August 2020.
Yep. Yep. You see it on the chart for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, so many interesting things with all this stuff, right?
So that's who owns it.
No
When
warrants.
can they sell? So
Yeah.
I'm locked up for up to 7 years on my shares.
Oh, wow. It's vendor stuff. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
And
Yeah,
there's a public schedule of what comes out when.
Yep. That's a long escrow. Yep.
Tell me about it. Take the money and run. Not on that
No.
one. So
The most important unanswered question right now: what's the thing that you can do right now that will deliver me the quantum increase in value that is required to induce me to take the risk?
So how much money? I think I covered that. We've got
Well-
about 26 million bucks in the bank. How much money do I need to succeed? Oh, 360, $400 million.
Just round up.
So
Just
if
go to a
Rick's
billion.
listening,
Just take $1 billion.
if Rick's listening and he wants to give me some money, seeing as you're using his questions. But that financing that piece is a fair way off.
Yes.
We have $26 million. As I mentioned earlier, we're burning 5 to 6 million a year. Predominantly, the work going forward is metallurgical test work, more metallurgical test work, and more metallurgical test work to make sure we get it right. PFS, which will cost you about $1 million. FS, that will probably cost you $2 million. So I believe we've got enough to get us through all of that and permitting to the point that funding to maybe if you build a pilot plant or to go into construction really depends on what it all looks like when we get there. And we haven't got there yet. But by that stage, I expect that more and more people will understand the story. And we won't be trading at $4 an ounce because I'll have put enough information out there that people start to understand that, holy crap, it might actually work.
It might work. It just might work, Alan.
Look, there will be people that believe today.
Yeah.
And there will be people that won't even believe after it's been running for a year and we're pouring gold bars.
Yeah, the adoption curves.
I've already had people say to me, it can't be that simple.
Yep.
Okay, it can't be.
Well, don't say what can't be done to the guy who's busy doing it, right?
Well, what's disappointing is there is nothing. Actually, now it's my turn.
Yeah, please do as you wish.
So,
Thanks.
Where's it gone? There it is. Share. I'll just go one. I'll go back one. Remember cautionary notes. Okay. Forward-looking statements and all that good stuff. So, this is a summary. What it was, where we're going, same resource, different process, much, much smaller. Fundamentally, when we took over the company, we have to be able to find a realistic, deliverable, financeable, and then expandable project that we can do.
Yeah.
That I don't have to
Yeah, you're
sell
not
my
going to be
soul
building
to
a
the
500,000 ounces. Sorry, but you're not building the 500,000 ounce a year. I know, great.
I know
looks great
how
on
to do
paper. It's not going to get. You're not going to do it.
Yep, I know how to do it. I know I can do it. But unless somebody's going to write me a big fat freaking check,
It's a big.
it
check.
ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So forget that one. If somebody wants to buy me for that one and pay me the MPV, I'm sure that my shareholders will agree to sell it.
60%, maybe 50%, maybe.
You
Which
might
is-
even get the controlling guys to over the bank at that level.
That's a big number.
Yeah. So this is what we're focused on doing. That gets me in the game.
Yeah.
That means that you take advantage of any spikes in the metal price and all
Yeah.
of those good things. You prove it up. You've got an expandable asset because 31 years of mine life is more than plenty.
Yeah.
So you can double it, right? So that's the fundamental concept behind it. This
It's
is
a
all on the website. This is
completely
just a
different
resource.
project too, Alan. Just comparing
Completely.
those two tables, that's a tremendous change. It's amazing.
Yes. This is my proof of concept.
This is oxidation. Yeah, this is oxidation happening right in front of our eyes.
If you gave this to a geologist,
3 months?
just look at it and go, it's
Beautiful.
oxidation, it's oxide ore.
Perfect.
And you go, well, it wasn't. Right?
Wow.
So that's my proof of concept test. We're doing a whole bunch of work now to work out what variables do what.
That's amazing.
This is the results that go behind it. We put these out in September last year. This is the oxidation. So it's a two-step process. Oxidize it first, then leach the gold and silver.
Sure.
You have to keep it separate. That's all I'm going to tell you. It'll cost you to find out the rest.
Yep.
Because there's a bunch of IP. So we almost got to 30% oxidation in 128 days. When we rinsed it, switched it over to lime and cyanide, almost 60% gold, 50% silver.
Yeah.
Yeah. In
Looks
a standard
like
90-day leach. Yeah.
Sure.
And that improved from 30 and 20. Yeah. The results of the PEA that we put out
and sorry, just the oxidation didn't look like it was leveling off too. Like, is there any?
No, it doesn't.
And do you need higher oxidation to?
I would like higher oxidation.
Yeah.
When we did the PEA, so these are the PEA results, we assumed a 70-75% recovery.
Oh, okay.
That is not 70-75.
Yeah, it's going to take some time.
But as you rightly pointed out, that is the straight line.
Yeah.
Can I keep it going to 35 or 40? And will that increase that gold recovery by another 10%, and the silver recovery by another 20? If the answer is yes, then stuff the proof of concept. There's the answer that supports the PEA.
And is that 30% of all the rock came out the other side oxidized, or what does that 30% mean?
So let me try and explain that again.
It's mineralogical level at.
So we put it in the tube.
Yeah.
We let it do that for 128 days. This is the proof of concept column. These are photos of it.
Yes.
We put it in a column. It did that. We then rinsed it to get rid of the sulfate. So this is a measure of the sulfate coming out. So we oxidized 30% of the pyrite from iron sulfide to iron hydroxide, carbonate, whatever it precipitated as an iron oxide, hydroxy oxide of some sort, and sulfate. Sulfate comes out the bottom in solution.
Yep.
You assay for sulfate. Depending on the amount of sulfate, you know what your head grade was, so you know how much sulfate has come out.
Oh, and so you're not changing the bath during the oxidation process. That's
it's irrigation. It's dripping through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So water down the top, not just water, but water down the top, air up the bottom, because you need two things. So the fundamental concept behind the whole damn thing, there's two. One is sulfides don't want to be sulfides.
Yeah.
If you make them wet and you give them air, it's called acid rock drainage. It's natural. It does it by itself.
Yep.
I don't need to kick it. Yeah. The other concept behind all of this is size is inversely proportional to time.
Sure.
So if you've got a boulder the size of your office, it's going to take a long time for solution to get all the way to the middle and products to get all the way out.
Yep.
If you break it in half, it's going to take less time, so on and so on and so on.
Yep.
If you grind it to bug dust, you can do it in 30 minutes.
Yep. You got a lot of surface exposure.
You got a lot of surface exposure, and it's usually called an autoclave.
Yeah.
So you put it under a bit of pressure and you warm it up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anything will get stressed out if you put it under pressure and heat it up a lot. The other end of the scale is wait for God to do it in nature and come back in a billion years, right? So the obvious point in between those that is faster, but not as fast and not as energy intensive, is to crush it to 13 millimeters, Why 13 millimeters? Because I looked over the fence, and that's what we did in the copper industry, and it seemed to work good at that size. Right?
That's a coarse crush. That's really nice, just out of the gate. Like you're not
It's
killing
half
yourself.
inch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not. It's not a painful,
You're not
heavy
blowing
lift.
up crushers.
And the cost, and the energy
Yes,
cost, and the infrastructure,
exactly.
and blah blah blah.
Yep. So we did a PEA around those assumptions, and it basically said, you've got a project you should keep looking at. Yeah, 750 all-in sustaining, strip ratio of 2.2 to 1, 150,000 ounces a year for the first 15 years, gold, silver equivalent, gold equivalent. At $1,600 gold, which is what, $500 off the gold price at the moment, 500.
Yeah.
22 silver, which is $3 or $4 off the silver price, 1.4 billion.
Yeah.
2.5 year payback. So that says keep going, Alan.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't say go build it tomorrow. It says keep going. Right? So it justifies to spend more money to go to the next stage, do the next test work, to keep working on it. You have a concept that's potentially economic. The proof of concept test work supports that.
Yeah.
The increasing grade supports that. Yeah. Pick your pair. I don't care which one you want. There's $2,000 gold for you with 25 silver. It's 2.2 billion. Yeah. And what, 22 and 2024 there somewhere, 47, 48% rate of return on today's spot prices.
Yep.
This is my we're cheap slide. But so this is the other thing. You mentioned energy. So everybody talks about green gold.
Yeah.
Right? Or green whatever, green copper, green gold, green lithium, green this, green that, green the other. Why do I need to connect now?
It didn't show up on this screen.
No, it's all right. So this is real. Your alternate process is an autoclave.
Yeah.
Okay. Or a heap leach. So I went to Barrick's sustainability report because I knew that internally it would be coherent.
Yeah.
Right? They would have used the same spreadsheet. They would have used the same questionnaire. They would have assigned. They would have used the same kilos per ton of diesel and whatever, right?
Yeah.
And when we compare Pueblo Viejo, that's 100% autoclave, diesel power, diesel trucks, versus Valadero, which is a heap leach, diesel power, diesel trucks.
Yeah.
So the only thing different is the two processes.
Yeah.
90% less power, 90% less water, no tailings dam. Right? So it is environmentally more friendly. It should be easier to permit because nobody wants to live near a tailings dam. Less CO2 emissions, and we're not sucking their wells dry to supply water. Yeah. So it's almost nirvana.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I could do it a bit quicker, it would be. Yeah.
But then you'd be US dollars rather than pesos. Maybe pesos.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So you know, that overall, and I think I've covered everything that's on this side. It's a big deposit. Your downside is that we continue to trade as dollars in ounces in the ground.
Exactly. Yep.
We can show a financeable, deliverable, expandable project. We can show that the technology is working.
Yep.
It is greener than the alternatives. We're in Durango, Mexico, which is a decent place to work. I've worked there before.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've got to finish.
I'll let you go.
And
you.
we're cheap.
Yeah.
And you've got Eric and Peter Palmetto. The one thing I wanted to show you is this. It's the flow sheet.
Yeah.
There is nothing on that flow sheet that has not been built elsewhere in the world somewhere.
Yeah.
The key is this heap here.
Yeah.
It is a direct copy of what they do in the copper industry.
Yep.
I know it is because I've built it.
Fascinating.
So that's us. That's the layout. There's a bunch of other information.
30 years of mine life. Beautiful.
Yeah.
150,000 ounces a year. Well, yeah, great.
Yeah. So that's the story.
Well done.
And now if I could work out how to stop sharing, there we go. No.
I may be able to do it over here.
There we go. Found it.
Looking good.
All
Wow.
right. So
Alan,
that's it.
what a treat. Thank you.
I've got to jump on another call. They're bugging me.
Yep. Sorry for keeping you. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
What real pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Good luck.
Mr. Allen.
Drop me a link when you put it up,
Oh yeah.
please.
Yep. And I'll probably go through all the effort of doing a transcript of this thing too, because I think there's a lot of little gems of wisdom here that I'd like to get written down and separate it out so it's not just lost in a video forever. But yeah, it'll be up on YouTube soon for anybody and everybody. This isn't sponsored content. Happy to do this here, help shine a spotlight on this story. And thanks to my friend for telling me to talk to you. I'm glad I finally did it. I'm very impressed. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.